Thank you so much, Howard. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening to you. 1, 2, this is your conscience speaking. Luke, I am your mother. Great, we're loud and clear. Folks, good evening, and thank you so much for coming. From the bottom of my heart, I really do appreciate your being here. It's incredibly exciting to take an idea from its germination through to actually seeing piles of books on a table. And I appreciate that you could be at home with your families this evening, and instead you're spending time with me. Thank you so much for being here. It means a great deal to me. This new book is quite a special one for me for a couple of reasons. The first one is that it's the first one dedicated to my little boy. That is Michael Kruger over there, and he is now 1.5 years old, and he slowed the writing down considerably, but it was ultimately worth it. And that's his mom over there, if you'd raise your hand. Eh? If you look at the picture, you have to wonder what got into her. And his little handprint is on the opening pages of the book. So that's one of the reasons that this one means a great deal to me. The other one is that this is my original topic, in the sense of this is the thing I've been most fascinated with for the longest period of time. I've been a professional speaker for some 15 years, and I've been enthralled by this idea of how you become the top name expert, the industry leader, the icon, for the better part of a decade. And the history behind the books is this. The very first book that I wrote with Penguin is the yellow one that you see on the table titled Own Your Industry, How to Position Yourself as an Expert. And the genesis of that one, of thinking about that idea, happened after I'd entered and won a couple of public speaking contests through Toastmasters. You heard of Toastmasters International? Yeah. One day I'm sitting in my little office at home and my phone rings. And a person on the other side says a line that every entrepreneur longs to hear. The person said, "Someone told me that you're the person to talk to." And I put the meeting down in my diary and I thought, yay, that's fantastic, good news. 20 minutes later, the phone rings again, a second time, and another person from a large multinational company that I had never marketed to used exactly the same phrase. Second time I put that little phone down, the mood in my office changed completely. It went from, yay, that's fantastic, to, hold on a second, how did that happen? And how do I make that happen again by design? Because I'm sure anyone here who has ever done anything like cold calling will know that's a best case scenario when the business starts coming to you. And since that time, I've been studying this idea of what it takes to consciously become an industry expert or a standout icon. So we're now 4.5 years down the line from that first book with Penguin, and the second one follows on the same theme, but it is a completely unique book. And the way that I look at it in my mind is the first one was how to be the expert. This one is how to be the icon. It's how to be the Branson of business, the Clarkson of cars, the Oprah of talk show TV, the Nigella of food, the Stephen King of horror novels, the Schwarzenegger of bodybuilding. And for the last 4.5, 5 years, I've been speaking about this topic, and I do a little experiment every time. I put up an industry on the screen, something like bodybuilding or horror writing or technology. And I ask the audience, I say, without thinking, what's the first name that springs to mind? And within 0.25 of a second, 90% of the room will all shout out exactly the same name. If you put up horror writer, you are going to get Stephen King. If you say bodybuilding, you're going to get Arnold Schwarzenegger. What's fascinating about that is that in cases like that of Arnold Schwarzenegger, he is not actually the highest or most accomplished bodybuilder. There are people who have outperformed him. Schwarzenegger has won the Mr. Olympia contest, the highest honor in bodybuilding, 7 times. Folks, did you know that there are 2 men who have each won it 8 times? Who's ever heard of them? Why don't their names come up? Why do we think Schwarzenegger? There are some fascinating things that happen as a result of being the top name, the icon in your industry. And what I've been after, and what I hope I can share with you, is the nuts and bolts of how to do that. So this is not just higher level philosophy, it's a blueprint and it's 50 ways to get there. Now, if you've been following any of the past books, you'll know that they're all 50 ways. That's the kind of format that I use every time that I write. And my philosophy, my thinking is this. I don't want to write a pass or fail idea, a philosophy that either works in your scenario or doesn't. Instead, I'm creating the goal to aim at and then giving you as many different paths as I can in order to get there. We'll have a variety of different spheres of influence, of worlds, of industries, just represented in this small room. And my belief is at least 40 of the 50 ways will work in your scenario. Now, of course, they are hard work. There is no doubt about that. I don't believe that it's humanly possible to implement more than, say, 15 of them in a given year. I think that would be superhuman. But I think over the course of, say, a decade, if you were to implement that many of the ideas, you could become a national champion or an internationally recognized icon. And it's all about how to do that. So, tonight here at GIBS, you are here, but I wonder if you could find yourself here. This is Nikki Bush. You might know her from TV. You might also know her from that side of the room. Nikki, won't you raise your hand? Great stuff. Nikki, of course, is South Africa's premier and most renowned parenting expert. And I'm picking on her on purpose, not just because she's a good friend and someone who speaks at GIBS and events all the time, but because she represents exactly what we're after here. When you think of the world of parenting and you need an expert voice, there is no one else in this industry whose name comes up like Nikki. It is foremost, it is front of mind, and people don't even have to think about it. You'll have heard her on 702, you'll have seen her on Espresso, and she is the author of the book, which is a part of positioning herself as an expert. And when big brands are spending into this industry, they have to have her. And it's a fascinating dynamic because when you are an unknown person, an unknown coach, consultant, speaker, guru, guide, expert within your sphere, people will call you and see if you are available for their dates. It doesn't work that way with Nikki, it's the other way around. She's the cornerstone and they build the event around her. And you will have other people trying to get into the space and trying to jostle and elbow their way in. Nikki is the quintessential expert and will be for a very long time because she's earned it. Many of the chapters in the book follow the kinds of principles, the practical things that people like Nikki have spent years, indeed decades, doing by design. Nikki has out-cared the competition. I'd like to show you how you can out-care the competition. So that's what we're after. Where are you now? I've got about 6 or 7 different levels that I talk about when we talk about icons and experts, and each one has its own realities, its own dramas, its own dynamics. So you start off in any industry, you are the rank novice. Generally speaking, this is the first job we ever do. And usually it's not a dream job, chances are it's not even a choice. A friend, an uncle, a parent, someone ushers you in somewhere, you walk into KFC and ask if they need help, you land your first job. And everything that you do is given to you by instruction. And typically at this level, when a person has fulfilled their instruction, they come to a stalling halt and wait for the next instruction. Keep that up long enough and you become a working drone. That's slightly better, but not much. At this stage, you've learned a little about the world around you, but the chances are you are still very reactive. You're beginning to engage with your scenario and lift your eyes to the horizon and see that there is a bigger picture going on here. Keep that up long enough and you become a practitioner. Now, at this stage, you are more proactive. Chances are you are still employed, and chances are you still have a job description. But you're starting to use your own initiative. You can see the playing field, you can see what needs to be done, and often you can start to see the disasters and the issues coming in advance because you have a little experience. Keep that up long enough and it starts getting exciting. You become a specialist. At this stage, you may or may not be employed. You might be running your own business. Being a specialist is a fascinating one for us in this room this evening because it is also a danger zone. It can become good enough. We can aspire to a certain level of fees, and actually through our own psychology, we can get stuck at the level of a specialist. What I look at in this book is the kind of thinking that goes beyond that, and it is counterintuitive, and in many cases, it's quite radical. I'll give you an example. You have to give away your best ideas for free. Most specialists think of their IP as something sacred to be hoarded and hidden. The world's top-level experts give it away for free because it's excellent marketing. Counterintuitive ideas. Keep that up long enough, you become the authority. Now you're starting to get calls from radio stations. You're writing articles for publications. You have become a voice guiding where your industry is going rather than a small cog in a system. And then, of course, keep that up long enough, and what we're after here is you become the icon. You become the Aretha Franklin of soul. You become the Michael Jackson of pop. You become the quintessential name synonymous with your world. So, why would you bother to do that? What's in it for you? Because in fact, I am inviting you to do a lot more work than is strictly necessary to get by in your world. You don't have to be the top name expert. Well, the book is divided into sets of numbers, and I have some 15 different reasons why it's worth your while and 50 different ways to get there. This evening, I'll give you 5 or 6 of the reasons it's worth your while, and I'll share with you 6 of the ways to get there. So the first reason it's worth your while is the most obvious one. Experts earn exponentially more. The value of the name drives how much they earn. Simple example. Is anyone here a Stephen King fan? Yeah. The first novel that I ever read, I was 9 years old, and for some bizarre reason, my parents let me read Misery by Stephen King. My wife reckons that explains a lot about why I am the way I am today. Stephen King is a fascinating case study. He is arguably the world's best-selling living writer, despite runaway phenomena like J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter and 50 Shades of Grey. He's been at it longer. There's a book that he wrote under a pseudonym. The pseudonym at the time was Richard Bachman. Richard Bachman is just Stephen King. He wrote a book called The Long Walk, and it's classic, vintage Stephen King. It will haunt your dreams for weeks afterwards. It is absolutely brilliant. Interesting thing is, it flopped in the US market. In its first year, it sold something like 20,000 copies, which by US standards is pretty much tanking, and by Stephen King standards is unheard of. The next year, they re-released the same book under the name Stephen King, and in half the time, it sold 200,000 copies. Same book, same man, same market. 10 times the sales. The only difference was the name. There is equity in being the top name in your industry. So that's the first reason it's worth your while. It's the selfish one. The next one is perhaps a little more noble. By a show of hands, who here has kids? And feel free to raise your hands if there's a very good chance. Yeah. Just about everyone in the room. Okay. You'll know, and I've just sort of recently started learning about, that incredible sense of satisfaction and reward you get when you teach your kids something that they didn't know before. And there's that moment when the penny drops and the lights go on, and it's as though you've handed them more levers with which to access the universe. Their worlds are bigger, they can do more, and it's because of you. As an expert, you get to do that all the time. You get to bring your purest, greatest art and live that every single day. You are a guide, a guru, a coach, and people thank you for how much of an impact you've made in their lives. Not a bad way to spend a career. That's the second reason it's worth your while. Third reason it's worth your while is the business imperative, and this one is fascinating to us. When you are an unknown practitioner in your industry, you have to knock on doors and sell yourself one instance at a time. When you're the top level expert, the dynamic flips and they start coming to you. You become the name at the end of the sentence. You know who you should talk to about that. And that's what we're after. There is great equity in being the top name in your industry. Which clients would you drop if you were earning an extra 0 on your annual income every year? What deals would you turn away because you don't have to, because you're not desperate for them? Could you be a little bit more selective about how you live your life if you could add 2 or 3 extra zeros to your income? And I do mean on the right-hand side. What would that change for you? So instead of you having to go to them and sell yourself day by day, instance by instance, the market starts coming to you. When big brands are spending into your industry, you are the logical go-to choice. Fourth reason it's worth your while. You arrive to find the door already open. Who here has ever written or tried to write a book? A few hands, Nikki, of course. Okay, a few hands around here. All right. Most people feel that somewhere deep down inside, rattling in their guts, there's a book trying to get out. And it's a wonderful thing to write a book and see it through to completion. But it is soul-destroying trying to get through the door and actually get a commercial publisher to take the darn thing seriously. Now let me tell you a tale of 2 time periods. The first time I approached Penguin, they had no idea who I was. And as a result of that, we did everything formally and by the rules. "Dear sir, dear ma'am, would you consider the following manuscript?" And 2 weeks later, a cold, curt email comes back and basically says, "Don't hold your breath, but send through a synopsis." And you send through the synopsis and you wait and you hope and you pray, and 2 weeks later, a cold, curt, formal email comes back and says, "Please send through the first chapter, no promises made." And months go by as you jump through hurdles and do everything formally because you have no equity with this brand. Eventually, I managed to get that first novel through, and I was really grateful when it was published. This one, the story goes like this. One day I sent them an email saying, "Hi, I have an idea for this new book." 5 minutes later, the email came back and said, "Cool, send it through, we'll do it." You arrive to find the door already open because you have earned that equity. That's what we're after. Which doors are currently closed for you? Which big brands would you like to work with? Which big associations would you like to take you seriously? Where would you be if the doors were open? When you're the top name, the top icon, you arrive to find the door already open. Next reason it's worth your while, we had a speaker come out and speak for the Professional Speakers Association of Southern Africa. And he happened to be a neuropsychologist. He studies the brain and talks about how human thinking works, how we engage with facts and ideas. He said something interesting. If they like and admire you, your audiences, your market, will try to find the truth in what you're saying. Now, of course, you can imagine that the flip side of that, the reverse of that, is true as well, and it is. If they don't like you, they will try to find the problems with what you're saying. This is why in public speaking, the first thing we ever teach and the first thing we ever train is get the audience to like you. And we teach people you should be the guide, not the hero of your presentation. Get the audience on your side and show that you have their benefit in mind. And that changes the psychology. If your buying market, if your target audience likes you in advance, it changes everything. The final reason that I'd like to share with you, funny enough, actually happened as a result of GIBS, and this story is in the book. One day, I'm speaking for one of GIBS' competitors. And I happened to do the presentation on how to be the top expert in your industry. And I sit down afterwards next to the marketing manager. And he turns to me and he says, "You know, it's been bugging me for years. We have many of the same courses as GIBS. We use some of the same textbooks as GIBS. We are the same price. Heck, sometimes we're even cheaper. And every year, GIBS comes out on top." And he says, "Until today, I didn't understand why." Then he gave me this golden phrase. It's just this delicious little turn of speech where he said, "The difference is in the dean." I thought that was so profound. If your business is identical to the business next to yours, the difference is you standing on the roof and waving a flag. If you are the Branson of business, you will stand out, and there are business imperatives for doing that, reasons why it's worth your while. He went on to say that their dean was a very shy, retiring person, didn't like controversy, didn't like to be seen in public. And the dean of GIBS, of course, was the exact opposite, out there championing causes, leading ideas, making a splash in the world, and it counted for something. It made a difference. So, what 3 qualities above all do you need to be an expert or an icon in your industry? This particular idea features in both books, and it's one that I love, and I believe this to the core of my being. Experts exist at the intersection of 3 qualities. Take any one of these 3 out of the mix, and you disqualify yourself as an expert in your industry. Let's take a look. The one on the left-hand side is the one that we intuitively think of whenever we think expert. What is it? Knowledge. Yes, it's the obvious one. You cannot be an expert in your industry without sufficient knowledge. Interestingly, though, it's not enough. You also need the one on the top and the one on the right. What do you reckon the one on the top represents? Charisma. Personality, it's the human being. To become the Clarkson of cars, you have to bring your unique personality. That idea terrifies most people. For most people, we look at someone like a Jeremy Clarkson, we think, he's so big, he's so brash, he's so over the top, I could never do that. Well, think about someone like Jamie Oliver in the world of food. There's a quiet, down-to-earth, bloke-next-door kind of guy. There's nothing big, brash, or over the top about him, but We know about his personality. We see his face, we hear his voice. He is an entity in our minds. He is a personality, albeit a quiet, humble one. And how well does that work for him? Well, one of his cookbooks a couple of years ago became the fastest selling book of all time. And it's based on his personality. He did clever things when he came into the industry, like using that framework, The Naked Chef. That was the first thing he did, the show and the book, and millions of people rushed out, bought the book, flipped open through the covers, and were sorely disappointed. Amateurs are anonymous, but experts appear. Nikki and I and a few other people in this room actually enjoy speaking in public, but by a show of hands, who here enjoys public speaking and presenting? Okay? That's an unusually high percentage. Most of the time, we don't even disturb the air currents in a room when we ask that question. There's an old joke that does the rounds as well, and it's based on reality, where in most tests, most synopses of people's worst fears, public speaking, death tends to come second, and public speaking tops the list. And what that teaches us, of course, is that at your average funeral, most people would rather be the guy in the box than the one delivering the eulogy. Now, of course, it's not actually public speaking. It's the fear of social judgment. That's the thing that is actually at the heart and soul of our greatest dread. Standing up in front of other human beings, expressing our thoughts, expressing our ideas. It is a business imperative. It is how experts are made. When last did you volunteer to be seen in the media? When last did you get hold of a programs manager for a TV show, for a radio show? When last did you write an article? Putting yourself in front of the public on purpose is the heart and soul of expert positioning. And of course, you have to give great value. Knowledge, personality, publicity. Take any one of those three out of the mix, you disqualify yourself as an expert. If you have all the knowledge but no personality, you are merely a specialist. If you have all the personality but no knowledge, you are a Kardashian. So we are talking about a smattering of theater. And let's step out of the business world for a second. Let me just show you how this works. We're going to pick on horror movies. I'm going to give you a few seconds just to think. What iconic scenes can you think of from horror movie history? In fact, we're a small group. Let's do it out loud. Give me a scene. What do you think of? I've got 3. Psycho. Okay. What else? Red Rum. Oh, yes. Here's Johnny coming through the door. Okay. Wish I'd thought of that one. That's a good one. Okay. Give you a few seconds to think about that. Here's what I got, and the first one was the first one we heard, the shower scene from Psycho. Folks, how many thousands of horror movies have there been over the years? We remember the ones that have that iconic moment, that thing that stood out. Here's my next one. I'm ready to tell you my secret now. I see dead people. And of course, and this is one of my all-time favorites, hey kid, want a balloon? Now, how do we tie this back to the world of business? Well, there are some people who understand this better than others. 10 years ago, if I'd said, who's the world's leading innovator? We would have heard names like Steve Jobs and Bill Gates. Today, you're going to hear a South African-born name. And of course, it is Elon Musk. What greater theater has anyone ever accomplished than to launch their own electric sports car into space using their own rockets and set it in orbit around the world playing David Bowie? I mean, come on. Now, I don't know about you, but I can't afford that sort of thing. It's outside of my budget. However, when you go to certain luxury car dealerships and you hand your car in to have it serviced, they bring you your coffee. And in the foam of the cappuccino, they have drawn their logo. That's theater. The other day, Vanessa and I are driving near Clearwater Mall, and there's a Jaguar dealership there near where we live. And the lights are all out. The whole place is darkened. But on the inside, they face the cars out, and just the LEDs are on. And it looked like these menacing cats lurking in the darkness. That's theater. It's not about spending money. It's about bringing a little magic to what you do. It's a business imperative because it makes you stand out. There's a speaker in the States named Joe Calloway who talks about becoming a category of one. There is no one else like you. That's how that is accomplished. So, what are some of the things that experts do differently? There are 50 different ways in the book. I'd like to share some 5 or 6 of them with you this evening. The first one, amateurs sell by the hour, experts sell by value. Howard mentioned Audible. I am utterly addicted to Audible. If you have a smartphone and you don't have the little Audible app, I strongly recommend it for you. It will change your life. I have always done a lot of reading. I love books. I've managed to triple the amount of content that I take in as a result of Audible. You can listen to a book while you're at gym, in the shower, during particularly boring lovemaking sessions, whatever. And everything is available, from Stephen King to Richard Branson to books on philosophy. You'll have to tell me what that was afterwards. I didn't mean with you. No, wait. That's worse. Audible.com, you download the little app onto your phone. Now there's another book, someone else's book, that I'd like to recommend for you this evening. It's an author by the name of Alan Weiss. Alan Weiss is arguably one of the world's leading, and certainly one of the United States' leading personal and executive coaches. And in his book that I was listening to last week, titled $1 Million Coach, he makes the point that he says, if you are a trainer or a coach or a speaker or anything in that kind of world, and you are charging by the hour, you are an amateur. And he says, if you are charging according to the value of the outcome, you're on the right track. He gives an example of a story, and the numbers just blew my mind. He lives in New York on the east coast of the United States. He gets a call from HP on the west coast from California. They say they've got this big project. They can't have anyone else but him because he's built up this brand, this career, this reputation as the leading icon in what he does. And they said, in 6 months, we have to make this thing a success, and it's worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Would you consult for this project? He said, yes, but I'm not coming to you. We'll do Skype calls and emails. And they said, okay, that's absolutely fine. How much will you charge? $750,000 for Skype calls and emails. Without question, they said yes. He sent his email through. They paid it in advance. Now, that's vastly different to saying, all right, 1 hour will be this much, 2 hours will be X. It's a whole different paradigm. And that's what we're after. I mentioned earlier, it's easy to get stuck at the level of a specialist. You have to think in a different way to get to the level of an icon. And your fees should be tied to the value that you offer, not the hours you work. It takes a bit of courage to get around that idea. I can tell you now that I struggle with it. But it is important to struggle with it and to win. Experts sell by value. Number 2. I always have a Nigella Lawson slide on the screen. My wife and I watch her show religiously, but for vastly different reasons. Amateurs sell a product, experts model an ideal. We get so caught up in the serious side of running a business, the nuts and bolts of making a process happen, that we sometimes lose sight of the humanity on the other end. People don't come to us to buy a product. They come to us because they see themselves living a certain life. People like Nigella Lawson understand that. I watched an interview by Time magazine the other day in which they asked her, what's your inspiration? What gets you going? And in this candid moment, she explained that when she was about 16 years old, she had this romantic idea in her mind about an Italian goddess. And she says she doesn't know why, but that just appealed for her. That just worked for her. And that picture, that ideal, has driven everything she has done since then. Now, you can see it in everything she does. I mean, you can see it on the screen. She is not Italian. She's as English as they come. But the spirit of that thing is what she is trying to accomplish and what she's trying to teach others. How many people around the world know how to cook to a greater or lesser extent? So why someone like her? The answer is because she's not just teaching you how to cook food. She's showing you how to be someone. And that matters. Who does your target market want to be? What outcome do they envisage for themselves? What is their ideal life, and can you guide them to it? That's how you become the guru, or as Seth Godin would say, the leader of a tribe of believing followers. It's sharing that lifestyle, showing them how to be who they want to be. The acid test for this one is this. Instead of thinking of it in terms of tribes of followers that you're growing, think of it in terms of one ideal person. Who's your ideal customer? Think of an avatar for the person that you want to appeal to. Now here's the difficult test, and it's quite a cruel audit for us as aspiring experts. Could that person get everything that they need to become who they want to be from you alone? If not, there are more books to be written. If not, there are more YouTube channels to be opened. If not, there are more articles to be written, and so on and so forth. Take that ideal person, that avatar, who's trying to become what you're showing them how to be. Can they get it all from you? If not, you're leaving money on the table and thought leadership opportunities unanswered. Idea number 3. Amateurs conform to the tone, experts change everything. We step out of the business world for just a second here. And we're looking at the Iditarod sled race in Alaska. It's cold, it's cruel, it's run over something like 1,700 kilometers. And for decades, the philosophy behind this race used to be, the biggest cowboy wins. He who has the grandest testes will survive. Along comes Susan Butcher. And Susan Butcher was a conscientious objector to the way the dogs were treated during these sled races. And her argument went like this. She said, if you train these dogs the same way we train elite athletes, you could do better, and the dogs would be happier. And nobody took her seriously. She went off, she trained her dogs, she did things the way that she thought it should be done, and the men laughed at her until she creamed them and won the race. And then the next year, she won the race again. And then she won the race a third time, and then she won it a fourth time, and suddenly people weren't laughing anymore. And the whole thing had to change to the way she did it, because it was so much better. What's the tone? What's the norm? What are the minimum expected levels in your industry? What if you brought such unexpected excellence to an area that doesn't see it coming that you changed the game? Could you do that? What if you changed the tone and became an industry leader as a result? Could you out-care the competition? Idea number 4. Amateurs slap on photos, experts craft a narrative. These days we're pretty much all on social media, or at the very least we're using some kind of visual to make our ideas come alive for people. You can say the same thing in vastly different ways. And I think most businesses in South Africa, most aspiring brands and experts, don't really see how much you can do with this idea. Let me show you what I mean. You could say, I'm a magician, and it's true, and the photo shows it, and it doesn't look like the kind of thing that's going to earn a lot of money. Or you can say exactly the same words, but change the visuals and say, I'm a magician. What are your visuals saying to the world? What tone, what level are they aimed at? You could say, we run a business. Or equally, you could say, we run a business. Whenever I do any sort of personal coaching with businesses, this is the first thing I look for, what I call mom and pop store betrayers. And I had such an interesting example of one a little while ago. A husband and wife team. They started their business in the kitchen of their home, and they were justly proud of this business. It grew into a multinational enterprise. They were seriously prospering. You go onto their website, the first thing you see was the two of them packing boxes in their kitchen. Now, like I say, they were justly proud of their humble origins, but that's not the tone you want to convey. We all know that Bill Gates started Microsoft in his garage. If you go onto the Microsoft website, that's not the first thing you're going to see. That kind of charming human humble origin story is fantastic for when they interview you on CNN. It is wrong for your visuals. You could say, we sell cars, or you could say, we sell cars. And it changes things. We want to aim for premium level perceptions. It changes your pricing, it changes your equity, it changes how the market perceives you. And to become the top level player, the expert, the icon, that's what we're after. Idea number 5, experts add a unique signature. What is so different about you that people turn to one another and say, that was really awesome? I came across this little meme on social media the other day. I have no idea what they sell. It could be timeshare, it could be holidays, It could be donuts, it could be yellow paint, I have no idea. But if you walk past that, wouldn't you have to know? There's something special going on there. There's a little bit of art, there's a bit of poetry. There is some attention to detail that says there's something special going on here. It's amazing what you can do with a little bit of thought if your heart is in it. What are your current touch points with your clients? What are your current touch points with your market? Are you losing opportunities there by not doing something memorable? One of the other books, the one Relentlessly Relevant, opens with this story, and I reference it in the new book as well. I heard this on 702. I've never met the guy, but a couple of people called in and verified that this is apparently true. There's a vendor who sells food from a little street stall just outside of Soweto. And if you get to the front of the queue and you order your bunny chow, you can either pay the standard price or the extra price. Now, if you pay the standard price, he will hollow out a loaf of bread, he will add in polony and meat and sauces, and don't ask too many questions, it's apparently delicious. And he'll close it up and he'll give it to you. But if you pay the extra price, he will wrap it up in cellophane and he will walk out to the main road. And he will watch for a truck. The next time a truck comes past, he will hurl your bunny chow in front of it. And the truck will hit your bunny chow and it will dance down the road at 120 kilometers an hour. Then he will dart out into traffic, pick up the bunny chow and retrieve it for you. Talk about managing risk at work. And the point of this exercise is that you get to eat a bunny chow that's been run over by a truck. But how cool is that? I mean, think about that for just a second. If I were a tourist from Germany or Japan or any of the kind of highly formal, regulated places, I'd go home and I'd say, you know, the Kruger Park was nice and Cape Town was nice, but there was this guy just outside of Soweto. And that's where I'd come alive. And if he understood how much he's got going there, he would be in the tour guides and he would be on various talk shows. There's something very special going on there. So what am I recommending? What I'm saying is, the next time you get your clients, your paperwork from your clients, I want you to walk to the edge of the N1. No, I'm kidding. The point is, look for something special that's only there to be something special. It's done by design for the sake of a little magic. These guys are very good at that. They occupy a highly regulated industry. The aviation world is bogged down by rules and regulations. So what do they play with? They play with the in-flight announcements. I think the best one I've ever heard, and it was perfectly delivered. The air hostess with a dead straight face, she stands in front of us and she says, in the event of an emergency, please put on your own oxygen mask before you assist your child. If you have more than one child, please pick your favorite now. Our final idea for the evening, experts remain relentlessly relevant. Do you know who you're looking at there? Sir David Attenborough. You've heard his voice 1,000 times. The penguin crosses the ice to approach his mate. It's always David Attenborough. Now, the other day, I downloaded on the Audible platform an old BBC comedy. I wonder if anyone's ever even listened to this one. It's from the sort of the 50s and the 60s, The Goon Show. Anyone remember that? Okay. I'm listening to this thing, and they say, quick, call David Attenborough. And I couldn't believe it. It was a reference to animals, and I thought, that is phenomenal. I went and I'd looked for the date of that show, 1955. 1955. And they referenced David Attenborough as the voice when it comes to nature and nature documentaries. That is staggering. It blows my mind. Think about this. Imagine if in the 1960s, David Attenborough had seen all the new camera equipment coming out and thought, that's not for me. I'll stick with the stuff that I used in the 50s. He would never have made it to the 70s. Imagine if he had done that in the 80s with 70s equipment. But what he has done is he has taken that theme and kept it traveling through time, updating his equipment and his methodology as he goes. The one constant is the idea of exploring nature. The means, the method, the equipment always evolves, and he's okay with that. Today he's using drones, he's using satellites, he's using underwater deep submergent submarines, and he is still leading this industry. That's phenomenal. Which equipment scares you? What technology makes you uncomfortable? Folks, the reality is it's not about the tech itself. It's about how that might help you to do the thing you do. That tech might be a fad, it might come and go, or it might be the way forward. But we have to remain relevant. We can't write it off on the grounds that we're uncomfortable with it. That becomes an irrelevancy trap. Now, you can do all of those things and still disqualify yourself as an expert. For example, my wife and I, our little guy turns 1, and Vanessa orders a birthday cake for him. And the person who makes it does this beautiful, beautiful design, impeccable. We go and we pick it up on the day, and they've transposed 2 letters on his name. They misspelt his name. The lady was quite delighted with the cake. She said, it worked out beautifully. Sorry I misspelled the name, but the cake is fantastic. Nice texture, moist, the whole thing. It wasn't about the cake. That nearly ruined our day. You can be the leading photographer in South Africa, take beautiful bridal photos, hand over the album, and you've misspelt the bride's name. It doesn't matter how good your work was. You have disqualified yourself as an expert. The next thing, neglecting the ribbon. Have you bought a car in the last couple of years? Whether it's new or used, when you go down to the dealership, what's that one thing that you expect to be there? It's that stupid ribbon. $20 from CNA, if that, but it had better be there because it matters. Ribbons don't cost anything. They are a show of care. The other day I go and I buy a shirt at a sort of high-end retail store. The lady behind the counter has been trained in how to create ribbons for her customers. I put the shirt on the counter, and she makes meaningful eye contact with me, and she says, "Excellent choice, sir." Now, you and I both know, if I had put a pink polka dot thong on the counter, she would have made meaningful eye contact with me, and she would have said, "Excellent choice, sir." It doesn't matter, it worked anyway. Then she wrapped the shirt up, walked around the counter, and presented it to me. And it went from being a shirt to a shirt. Are you taking care of the ribbons around what you do? Psychologist Steven Pinker says style earns trust. And it's a very simple point, but a very profound one. If you have excellent spelling, good grammar, great attention to detail, people will assume that you are cleverer than you actually are. Attention to small details wins you great trust. And it really matters. The next one, the leering uncle. "Hello, customer, come sit on my knee." You disqualify yourself as an expert. Perhaps the worst one, the assumed prejudice. A while ago, something goes wrong with our electric gate at home. Vanessa and I call a guy to come and help us out. He stands right next to me, and he makes a series of hardcore racist jokes at the expense of his own team. Never been so uncomfortable in my entire life. We vote with our money, he will never be back. Don't assume a shared prejudice. Folks, if you put in the time and do it strategically, you can become the top name in your world by design. When you are that name, a number of things change for you. The business comes to you. The radio stations call you. They want your insight, they want your opinions. They build the event around you, and your price tag no longer matters because they have to have you. Your results are beyond question. Put in the time and the effort, and you can arrive at that pinnacle. How do you know when you have arrived? It goes like this. You no longer have any competitors. You are no longer worried about what other players are doing around you because you've been doing this for so long with such excellence that there is no real competition. You've become a category of one. And what's left for you at that stage? Well, it's to prove how great you truly are by reaching down and lifting others up. Because you no longer suffer from competition. And the fulfilling and the satisfying thing becomes coaching others to get to where you are. May you be richly blessed as you aspire to become the leading name in your industry. Thank you so much.